Dive into the gripping recap of Hugh Glass, a legendary explorer who faces the unforgiving wilderness after being attacked by a bear and left for dead by his hunting companions. Against a backdrop of snowy landscapes and constant dangers, Glass embarks on a quest for revenge against his former friend, John Fitzgerald, in a thrilling narrative filled with action and emotion. Don't miss out on this captivating recap and subscribe to our channel for more exclusive content. The opening scene depicts Hugh Glass speaking to his son Hawk in the Pawnee Indian language, explaining to him that even though he is scared and wishes for his troubles to end quickly, he must keep fighting as long as he can. As we hear Glass' voice, images show Glass with his wife and Pawnee son, their house on fire, and him holding his wife in his arms. Glass and Hawk cross a river with other members of their hunting group. As they pursue the elk, they camp near a river in the Missouri countryside with other fur trappers. They are led by their leader, Andrew Henry. A naked man, missing from the group, arrives at the camp and collapses forward, an arrow lodged in his back. Another man is hit by an arrow in the neck and falls into the campfire. The hunting group is attacked by a tribe of local indigenous people, the Arikara Indians, also known as the Ree. The men retaliate with their rifles. Glass is attacked and nearly strangled to death, but one of his companions saves him. Some men gather their furs and provisions and head towards a boat to escape. The Arikaras themselves are searching for the chief's daughter, Powaka, abducted by unknown white men. The men abandon their boat and begin walking on land towards Fort Kiowa. Hawk is upset by John Fitzgerald's racist remarks. Hawk is half Indian from his mother's side, but Glass quickly intervenes to defend his son and advises him not to retaliate against Fitzgerald. During a hunting trip in the forest, Glass encounters a bear and her cubs, and he is quickly attacked by the adult bear. The animal claws and bites Glass, throwing him as he tries to defend himself. Despite his efforts to shoot the bear, he fails to kill it. The bear attacks again, and Glass manages to retrieve his knife, stabbing it repeatedly as they tumble down a hill together. Glass lands in a ravine, and the dead bear falls on top of him. The men find him later and attempt to treat his severe injuries. Meanwhile, the Arikara warriors continue their search for Powaka. They encounter French fur traders and exchange the furs by the riverbank for 5 horses. The hunting group men carry Glass on an improvised stretcher, but he only hinders their progress. They attempt to carry him up a hill, but he slips, causing the other men to fall with him. Fitzgerald then suggests simply killing Glass to end his suffering. Henry, hesitant, aims his gun at Glass's head, but he cannot bring himself to do it. He then proposes to pay $75 to anyone who stays with Glass. Hawk and Jim Bridger volunteer, despite Fitzgerald's warnings about the danger of staying with Glass. Henry then increases the offer to $100, even persuading Fitzgerald to stay with them until Glass's end. Glass continues to suffer greatly and continues to have visions of his wife and the day his house was burned down. Fitzgerald finds himself alone with Glass and tries to convince him to let him end his suffering to prevent anyone else from being delayed or dying, including Hawk. Since Glass is unable to speak, Fitzgerald suggests that Glass should blink if he agrees, knowing that Glass will eventually blink whether he accepts Fitzgerald's offer or not. Glass keeps his eyes open for a while before closing them instead of blinking. Fitzgerald deliberately interprets this as a blink and starts to suffocate Glass. Hawk arrives and sees Fitzgerald suffocating his father. Hawk then calls out to Bridger for help, leading to a struggle with Fitzgerald, during which he stabs Hawk in the abdomen, then leaves him to bleed out while Glass watches helplessly. Fitzgerald then disposes of Hawk's body and tells Bridger he doesn't know where he went. Later that night, Fitzgerald urges Bridger to leave with him, claiming to have spotted Ree Indians near the creek. Having already dug a grave for Glass, Fitzgerald forcibly drags him there and partially buries him as Bridger, albeit reluctantly, lets him. Meanwhile, Henry and the rest of the hunting group endure a difficult march towards Fort Kiowa. As Fitzgerald and Bridger approach, Bridger realizes that Fitzgerald was lying about the Ree Indians near the creek. He aims his gun at Fitzgerald, but Fitzgerald manages to turn it against him. Fitzgerald pulls the trigger, but the unloaded gun simply clicks. Despite this, they continue on their way. Glass wakes up groggily and struggles to free himself from the earth. He begins to crawl through the woods in search of food and warmth. He comes across Hawk's frozen body due to the cold and decides to stay close to him. Glass finds a thick bear hide to wrap himself in and keep warm. Continuing his journey through the woods, he feeds on roots and bone marrow. He attempts to start a fire for further warmth and uses some of the remaining gunpowder to treat his throat wound. As the Indians draw near, Glass descends the rapids to escape them. Fitzgerald and Bridger continue their march. They come across a settlement ravaged by fire, with corpses littering the ground. A woman emerges from her burning hut and spots the men. Bridger quietly offers her some food. Glass becomes increasingly chilled and hungry. He heads to the river and catches a live fish, which he devours raw. Later, he climbs a hill and spots a Pawnee Indian feasting on the carcass of a bison. Glass approaches him cautiously and gestures for a share. The Indian tosses him an organ, which Glass eagerly devours. In the morning, the Indian notices the infected bear scars on Glass's body. Glass explains that his companions left him for dead and killed his son. The Indian reveals that his own family was slaughtered by an enemy tribe, the Sioux. He is now searching for other members of his tribe, the Pawnees. Fitzgerald and Bridger finally reach the outpost and reunite with their group. Fitzgerald informs Henry that they failed to save Glass or Hawk, then claims his payment. Bridger, silent but visibly disturbed, refuses any reward. Glass and the Indian move forward together. They spend the evening sitting, catching snowflakes in their mouths, and it's the first time in a long while that Glass appears peaceful. The Indian gathers materials to quickly build a sweat lodge, where he places Glass, who is feverish. Glass begins to hear his wife's voice, then sees himself walking towards Hawk before embracing him in an old church. The Pawnee performs a healing ritual for Glass's wounds. When Glass wakes up, he realizes that the Pawnee is gone. Shortly after, he discovers that the Indian has been hanged by the French trappers. He sneaks into their camp and catches one of the men raping a woman who turns out to be Powhatan. Glass confronts the rapist, threatening him with a weapon, and frees Powhatan. He then takes a horse and releases the other horses before heading into the woods, where he lights a fire. In the morning, the tribe searching for Powhatan begins to attack. Glass holds them off with his rifle before mounting his horse and fleeing. The tribe pursues him on horseback to a cliff where Glass and his horse fall over the edge. The horse dies, and Glass is injured once again. As night falls and the cold intensifies, Glass opens up the horse, removes its organs, and slips inside its carcass to stay warm. When he wakes up, he exits the carcass and heads towards a snow cave where he carves the words, "Fitzgerald killed my son." Some time later, at the outpost, one of the French hunters arrives with Glass's canteen, which Bridger had left on the ground after Fitzgerald buried him. Thinking it belonged to Hawk, Henry organizes a search team through the woods. They then find Glass, limping towards them, and bring him back to the outpost. Henry learns that Fitzgerald has fled. The French hunter informs Henry that Fitzgerald was heading towards Texas and had also emptied the safe containing the group's wages. Henry then confronts Bridger with his rifle, strikes him to the ground, and detains him in the stockade. Glass assures Henry of Bridger's innocence, stating that he was merely following orders. He also recounts to Henry how he personally witnessed Fitzgerald kill his son. Upon learning that Fitzgerald is heading towards Texas, Glass volunteers to track him down himself. Reluctantly, Henry agrees to let Glass join the hunt. The two men encounter Fitzgerald and split up to capture him from opposite sides. Henry finds Fitzgerald first and considers bringing him back to face trial for murder. The two men face off, armed, but Fitzgerald kills Henry. Glass discovers Henry's body and places it back on his horse, using a branch for support. They then spot Fitzgerald, who opens fire with his rifle from a distance. Thinking he has killed Glass, Fitzgerald fires, but he actually hits Henry's body. Glass retaliates and wounds Fitzgerald, who flees as Glass pursues him. The two men become trapped in the woods, where Fitzgerald shoots at Glass. After a struggle, Glass gains the upper hand and is about to kill Fitzgerald. But Fitzgerald declares that killing him won't bring Glass's son back. At that moment, Glass sees the Indians chasing him, along with Powhatan. Realizing that vengeance is in God's hands, he pushes Fitzgerald into the water and lets him drift towards the Indians. The tribe's chief grabs Fitzgerald and kills him with his knife. They spare Glass after Powhatan tells them he set her free. Although he has achieved his revenge, Glass finds himself once again alone, wandering through the cold lands. He falls to his knees and has a vision of his wife walking again in the light. The final shot shows Glass's eyes filling with tears.